welcome to Terrorism for Dummies. I am not a Muslim, and I'm trying to gain perspective and get a little understanding about what's going on with this whole terrorism issue. I'm getting to know Muslims. We get in dialogues, especially with non-Muslims, and the first thing they'll almost always say is, I just can't accept that terrorism. Those terrorists have got to stop. So the whole terrorism issue seems to get in the way of any dialogue. So it's the quintessential white elephant in the room in every single conversation we have about Muslims. It makes you wonder, is it just a bunch of crazy people? Well, if it was one little village and one small group of people, I'd say that might be true. But 1 in every 5 people on the planet is a Muslim. Now, if they were all terrorists, we'd be goners. So there must be something more going on than what meets the eye. What I would say to myself is, what's wrong with those people? Why are they doing that? And as long as we continue asking ourselves that question, we really never have to come up with an answer. So I started thinking about this as a human and figure, hey, we're all humans here on the planet together. And if we share this humanity, why don't I ask, what's wrong with this humanity? What's wrong with us? Why are we committing terrorism? Because if I share humanity with the Muslims, then terrorism is our issue. And that's not a Muslim issue, it's a humanity issue. And if you look globally, terrorism isn't just being done by Muslims. And we have to define what terrorism is as well. I ask myself, why did I commit terrorism? Then answers come really easily. Maybe the situation in my life is so desperate that terrorism, martyrdom, is an option for me. How desperate would things have to get here in America for martyrdom to be a viable option for a parent to consider for his child? It's tragic. It's tragic that people would consider that. And it doesn't mean they love their children any less. It means their life situation is something different than ours. And there are inequities all over the world. Take a look at what is terrorism. Here in America, and I'm not an America basher, I'm very happy and very grateful to be an American, to live here on this soil. When the colonists came over and settled here in America, we met the Native Americans. We took away all their land. This was their place. We stole it from them. We abused them. When they were sick and cold in the winter, we gave them pox-infected blankets. We killed their women, their children. While we drove them and killed them and exterminated them, some of them went and killed innocent women and children who were traveling across the plains. And then the Indians got the reputation of being scalpers. They're not like us. They kill innocent women and children. Yet our government had sanctioned killing them, handing pox-infected blankets to them. And their little babies were swaddled in these little blankets that we left out for them. And they died of disease. Who were the terrorists? We went and raped and killed and tortured little children and murdered people in the Philippines. Terrorism is a two-way street. A few years ago, Hezbollah, which I thought was just this demonist, horrible a terrorist group, well, turns out they take care of all the kids and help people over in Lebanon. I didn't know that they were actually a benevolent group as well. We're all multifaceted. Hezbollah was shooting missiles from Lebanon into Israel, which I think is a pretty crappy thing to do, but, well, so it's happening. And Israel's put in a strange position where they're trying to defend themselves, and bombs are coming from city centers where there's housing and people. So Israel says, hey, we're in a tough bind here. We're only going to strategically respond and try to get the terrorists back and try to punish those terrorists. Then we find out that Israel was sending cluster bombs into neighborhoods. Why would Israel shoot bombs? And a cluster bomb lands and breaks into little clusters and kills innocent women and children. So how is that not terrorism? It's stunning. Well, I guess if you don't read about it in your newspaper and the media doesn't plaster it everywhere, you never know. Let's flash back to the Japanese here in America. They looked different language, they kept to themselves. During World War II, we were at war with Italians and Germans too. We didn't inter them. The Japanese, we put them in prison camps during the war because we perceived the Japanese as being different from us, like we see the Muslims today. The Italians and the Germans had already assimilated. They were part of us. They were part of our society. Now, we couldn't imprison ourselves. We complained that that the Japanese were terrorists. Something like terrorists. We didn't call them that, but they have kamikaze pilots where they blow themselves up as they flew a plane into something. So very similar to terrorist act. They take a plane and they fly, planning on dying. A suicide or a homicide mission to kill other people. We thought that was so ungodly. They saw it as a very proud moment. And more interestingly, we, America, dropped bombs, nuclear bombs, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We killed innocent women and children by the droves, numbers that would far exceed anything any Muslim terrorists have ever done. So who are the terrorists? If we're going to talk about terror, just because you run the government doesn't mean that's not terror. Terror is when people feel terrorized, they feel unsafe. And when you're the government in charge and you're oppressing others, you don't need terrorism. When you face the Israeli army, and they are a powerful army, and you get slaughtered again and again and again, all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, they're in our streets, our children are dying, they're beating us on this front. What can we do to trump them? Well, say what we want about terrorism and martyrdom, but it is effective. Sadly, the news, our own media, has helped create terrorism into an entity, because all it ever was a technique of fighting. It isn't a philosophy, it's not an ideology. But now, because the media has so hyped it up, it has become a quasi-ideology where people, small groups of actual lunatics, can get together and make an impact in the name of terrorism, and they can be quote-unquote terrorists. But the spirit of terrorism was, I believe, a tool for the underdog to make an impact on their oppressors. And it's very effective. It's so effective that there are copycats out there using terrorism. And believe me, it isn't just Muslims. It's all over the world. It depends on where your media source is. And right now, we have a love-to-hate relationship with Islam. Basically, we sold terrorism. Terrorism that didn't even exist. We could have said, oh, this group bombed, this group did that, but you call it terrorism. It's like saying with the Indians, they're scalpers. Well, they were killing people, but you give them that name, scalpers, and all of a sudden it demeans them, and you can label them. You look at an Indian, a Native American, you say, there's a scalper. You look at a Muslim, you say, there's a terrorist. The Catholic Church has got a problem with molestations. Now, the truth be told, a child isn't more likely to get molested by a Catholic priest than by anybody else. But the fact is, in our minds, because of the media, they've blown it up so much that we think Catholic priests are pedophiles. Knowing that there are Catholic priests pedophiles, and then saying, hey, those Catholics, they're pedophiles. No. It was a small number of Catholic priests. A small number of people who claim to be Muslims are being, doing terrorist acts. To blame all Muslims is a great injustice. And it is a racial and religious profiling, and it's time we stop. And we're making the problem worse. We've taken the rights away from American Muslims and Muslims all over the world. You know what? If it's happening to them, it's going to happen to you. It's going to happen to us. Once we allow them to take their freedoms away, we're inviting them to take our freedoms away. To protect our own freedom, I think we need to take a stand against our perception on terrorism. And the cure to end this problem is to stop raising one-sided nationalistic children. It's time we start teaching our children both perspectives. If you're a leader and you're teaching the children of your society only your side of the story, you are breeding terrorism. If you are planting seeds of hatred, if you are abandoning the hungry and you're abandoning your allies, you're planting seeds of terrorism. If you're hating people online and you're being cruel, you're planting seeds of terrorism. Let's stop planting seeds of terrorism and start planting seeds of hope.